Kelly Swanson here, author of Who Hijacked My Fairy Tale? And I think everybody listening is probably asking themselves that same question right now. So for today anyway, I'm your resident fairy godmother, your coach for the moment, if you will. And as your coach, I must admit, and I think we'll all agree, that our team has faced some losses. That's for sure. Nobody came out winning from 2020. But it's not fourth quarter. It's just halftime. And we may be tired, but we're not out. We just need a second wind, a dose of inspiration, a new perspective, and a new strategy or two. The beginning of a year is always a good time to cast a new vision, to refresh our spirit and renew our playbook. Now, no matter what sport you're playing, that playbook, it becomes your guide, your North Star. It keeps you grounded in what really matters. It keeps your team in sync and encouraged and helps you focus on those silver linings that are waiting at every turn. I am so excited to have created this 2022 Silver Lining Playbook just for you. Now, a little bit about me in case we haven't met or you don't remember. I know, so much has happened, right? I can bring you up to speed really quick if you're new. I'm the one with the big hair, the big laugh, the big personality. I live a very large life, or at least I was a couple of years ago. I was living the dream, or at least a low-budget version of it anyway. I'd even launched my new one-woman show in theaters in January of 2020. Little did I know what was coming. That just a couple of weeks to flatten the curve would become the famous last words of 2020. I learned some things I would like to share over the past couple of years. First thing I learned, people are kind. Until you sneeze behind them in line at the grocery store. I've learned that nobody looks sexy in a face shield. And somebody please tell Grandpa that that mask is for your face. There's just some things you can't unsee. I learned that do-it-yourself pantyhose masks are a Pinterest fail. Not only are they ineffective, but looking like you're a robber is not the right look when you walk into the liquor store. And yes, liquor is essential as long as there's a world with remote learning in it. I learned there is a point where those yoga pants will finally stop stretching. And that they will call the cops if you bang on the window of the Ulta store during the pandemic because you're out of eyeshadow number 11 burnt amber and they're the only one who sells it. And what am I going to wear to my cousin's remote wedding? I learned the pastor will not think it's funny if you put those fiery pits of hell images behind your backdrop in your Zoom Bible study. And those devil horns you gave your son in his Sunday school class will not get you the laugh you think it will. I've learned the stewardess will not think it's funny when you ask if she's got an extra ventilator on board for your service animal. I learned that maybe you're ordering too much on Amazon when the delivery guy comes up and asks how that new keto diet's going and how those new hair extensions really make your eyes pop. And maybe it wasn't healthy to spend so much time watching TV in quarantine that you're even willing to binge watch Full House, the old version, for the second time. And maybe it's too much social media when you put a message out at 3 a.m. on Twitter just to see who else is up. I've learned that just because it's a virtual doctor's appointment doesn't mean they expect you to show up naked. Oops. I've learned to hate the words, trust the science, and that if you're tired and you're ready for a night out with friends to end, just ask them if they thought the election was stolen. And I've had time to really ponder the fact that I will wait in a line that curves around the block for my turn to enter in the next trio of customers they're allowing into the bath and the body, all to get a buy-for-one scented candle. But I still can't find the time to work out. I've learned that social distancing proves that most people don't know how long 6 feet is. I wonder what else they're miscalculating. And if anybody is studying social human behavior on social media in lockdown, I know their top conclusion would be that most people do not own a dictionary. And the ultimate irony, that in a world where we're all stressed and eating and drinking on overload, our meme selfies are getting prettier and skinnier. Thank you, apps. I think when we all finally come out together again, it's going to be a huge shock, hiding behind your Snapchat filters. I learned that everybody is completely burned out on all these Zoom meetings. I know, right? Even the stalkers have stopped showing up. They're like, I'm out. I just can't watch her pour her cereal and wiggle her feet in slippers up on a hearth one more time. And she may look cute in that bathroom selfie, but in real life, she has a beard and a double chin. I learned that the fastest way to make an enemy in an online call is to take your phone walking with you. So the phone shakes the whole time and the wind muffles your voice. Yeah, we know you're working out. Show off. And I also learned that even when everything crumbles around you, there is always hope. I learned the same thing I've learned in every other hardship in my life, that I really only have one choice, and how I'm going to choose to spin this. The story I write. Most of this out there I can't control, what life gives me. But I always control the story I write with what life gives me. As C.S. Lewis once said, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. And if some people I know and throughout history have made it through far worse things than this, then I can too. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now, starting where I am and changing the ending. And I hope you'll join me, because I think we can do it together. You know, we're much stronger with each other than alone and apart. So if you're in, so am I. Now, anybody who knows me knows I am a rule follower. I like lists. I like checking things off my list. I am an if-then kind of a gal. If I study, I'll get good grades. If I treat people nicely, then it makes me a good person. If I pay my son, then he'll clean up his room. I play by the golden rules we learned at church and around the dinner table. The boundaries, that make us sleep at night knowing we colored inside all the lines of our coloring book and our picture will be just right. 2020 was hard for me for many reasons. But one of them was because in an instant, the rules were gone. All my jobs for the year just disappeared. Poof! Our family's livelihood. Wait, I was always told that if I was willing to work hard, then I would always find work. School is closed. Now I'm the teacher. Wait, I would have studied harder in math. I'd have known I'd have to teach it with no degree and no notice. I'm sorry, Miss Swanson, we can't get your medication. Our shipments have been delayed. You'll just have to wait. What? We're sorry, Miss Swanson, but you can only have 1 pack of toilet paper. It's the rule. We're sorry, Miss Swanson, but you can't come inside to visit your great aunt. We're sorry, Miss Swanson, but fake eyelashes are not essential items. Yes, your bourbon is still on the safe list. I felt like I woke up in a world with no boundaries. I lost all sense of structure. It's like somebody took out all the lines in my coloring book and broke all the crayons. If this is you, then here's a play in your new silver lining playbook. There is no rule book. So don't feel bad that you don't know what to do. Honey, nobody does. Nobody saw this coming. Nobody could prepare. And we're all working in a new sport with no set of rules, no coach, no training, and no way to even tell if we're winning or losing. For some of us, it will be the hardest game we've ever played. Now, when you can't follow the rules, or worse, there are none, things get really scary. And yet, sometimes, It's only when we take the rules away that we find, when they remove the lines in our coloring book, that we see a whole different picture. You see, that's what happened to us in our own small town. In this strange time that we're living through, there are stories that leap to the front of the news. You know, the ones that splash in brilliant color, catapulted by the likes and shares of an instant click world where we are as disconnected as we are connected. The stories that the ones with the biggest microphone have chosen for you to hear. But then there are the countless other stories that are whispered in the least traveled places that for some reason don't ever make it to the big microphones. I believe that even in the storm of 2020 and 2021, there were countless stories that went untold. Moments of brilliant color bursting through the clouds. In fact, I bet each one of you has a story of something that happened. It might seem small, but when shared and collected with all the others, well, would make for a beautiful quilt. So this is one of those stories that you probably didn't hear about, unless you were there. And even if you were there, well, this wasn't really one of those light up the marquee in Times Square kind of moments. More like where a million little ordinary flickers of light blend together into a moment you never forget. Which is kind of the point. For it's these moments that truly take your breath away, as they're obviously divinely orchestrated. For I think fate weaves the best tapestries out of the most threadbare strands of yarn. So it all started, as with most 2020 stories, with a pandemic, and a small town struggling to defeat this unmatched opponent that most certainly did not play fair. I know, everybody's already familiar with this sport. We all witnessed the abrupt shift in society. One moment claiming how we're too busy, another selfie with friends, time for that vacation at the beach, living in the digitally connected world where every single moment is shared on the internet in ways we never would have thought to share face to face, right? I mean, who walks into a wedding reception and pulls out pictures of the cereal you fixed this morning? Or, hey, anybody want to see my abs after I took my workout? Hashtag hot yoga. It's funny how our realities can become distorted when we take them online. And then one day in 2020, online suddenly becomes our new reality. So we went from being so connected online that we actually became disconnected, to actually being locked down with nothing but our selfies, real social distance. Some of us becoming so bored now, we kind of do want to see what she just had for breakfast. I'm just saying. We learned what it's like to distrust every person you come within 3 feet of. The overwhelming addiction to spraying everything that comes into our house. And can the dog get COVID? Because he just played down the street. We learned what it's like to never show the bottom part of our face. And now you can talk to yourself in the store and nobody will even know. Oh, but heaven forbid you cough and you're public enemy number 1. Some of our jobs went into overdrive as we're cursing the fact that we ended up in that essential worker pile while the rest of us felt time literally come to a crawl. As we saw our children and spouses in a whole new level of closeness that we used to think was always outside our busy grasp. And now we realize was a tad bit overrated as marriages were pushed to their very limits. And so was loneliness. Some people tell me, please don't talk about 2020. We're so over it. But you know, some of us are not over it. Some of us are very much still in it. And I just want you to know that you're allowed to have your moment. And I will not push you to get over it. Which is why one of our strategies in the Silver Lining Playbook is that it is perfectly okay to say this sucks. It's quite healthy to acknowledge that this is a mess. You don't have to minimize your pain, and nor should you. Let yourself have that moment to cry, whine, stomp your feet, and grieve. Just do it in the locker room, not out on the field. So don't be so busy pushing your grief, sadness, and anxiety away that you just bury it deeper, where it will fester and it'll come out later in a worse way. So let it out now so you can let it go out. People here in our small town, being the innovative sort that they are, we found ways to adapt. Suddenly, the same old people who just yesterday were complaining about that newfangled computer was rotting out our brains are now suddenly becoming Zoom experts, landing in that deliciously entertaining gap between understanding the most cutting-edge technology, yet not understanding where the camera is. So now all we ever see is Pawpaw's ear. And for heaven's sake, somebody buy him an ear hair trimmer for Christmas. Those choppy cyber family gatherings where a slurred, frozen face sends a family member to call 911 thinking Great Aunt Bert just had a stroke, when it was really just a wonky internet connection. Or the time my great Uncle Buford stood up in the middle of his Zoom birthday party and didn't warn us he wasn't wearing pants. The live streams inadvertently left running where we got to hear what our coworkers really thought of us. And school children bouncing in and out of remote learning like ping pong balls as we suddenly developed a profound new appreciation for teachers. The people here were no stranger to hardships. And so they all tackled the pandemic with the grit that'd been passed down to them. We've been poor before, we can be poor again. And there was never a shortage of advice on everything from how to make your own hand sanitizer to the proper mask fitting to the best way to conduct your virtual church Bible study. And as most advice, it tended to be contradicted by lunch, leaving you, well, not much better than it found you. But anyway, in our town, you could take away our favorite things and we'll still somehow find our way back to a covered dish casserole. Only now you can't share the same spoon. For a while in 2020, it seemed the town was holding its own in the fight against COVID, for the most part. But as with any fight, there's the one thing that really starts to defeat you. Time. The weariness of getting up to yet another day of this. The tiny little defeats that don't feel like much until they're just too much. And one day you can't figure out why you simply don't want to get out of bed. So no, it wasn't the big things that made it feel like this pandemic was going to break us. It was the small things. The rites of passage, painted over. From weddings to graduations to funerals. For at least in our town, what have you left if not these traditions that carry you through the highway mile markers of your life? Snapshots stored up in a silver frame collection covering a grand piano in an old woman's home, displayed to all passers-by as a testament to a life well lived. It was hardest to watch for the younger ones, because most of the gray-haired bunch, we'd already smelled the perfume of disappointment or dreams unfulfilled. But the young ones, well, they were what made us smile as we got to relive our moments through them. Their first date, waving at them as they drive off to college, or cheering them on when they get dunked in the holy water or win the conference tournament, excited at another reason to have a covered dish. The traditions that are just as much for us as they are for the younger ones having them. That was one of the hardest parts of that year in our town. The drive-through graduation. The quinceañera they'd been planning since she was 5, maybe next year. The gangly kid that finally makes the basketball team but never gets to play. The let's show grandma baby's first steps that aren't the same through an iPhone lens. The last Thanksgiving he'll get to be here before he enlists, but all the chairs sit empty this year. I think that's why it was so discouraging to hear that the prom was being canceled. Of course, everybody understood you had to be responsible. And on its own, it doesn't really add up to an earth-shattering loss. I mean, let's keep things in perspective. But it was just one more thing in a town that was already feeling defeated. And everybody just moved on, some a little relieved that another project had been swept off their desk. Everybody, except one, the lunch lady. We all called Wheeze. Oh, that was just a nickname. I'm not even sure what her real name was. Most of us just knew her as the tiny older lady who stood last in line wearing the hairnet and the sensible shoes. And so at their next Zoom staff meeting, for once, she raised her hand and shared her idea. We should figure out how to have a prom anyway, she said. Of course, it was immediately shot down, as most ideas are, especially for something that had already been decided by a committee. But why not, she asked. What if there's another way? Maybe you're sitting in a moment just like we's, around a different table, a different committee, ready to give up on something because you can't do it the way you always have. Maybe you could be asking yourself that same question we's did. What if there's another way? Anyway, she just wouldn't let it go. And finally somebody blurted out, "Why do you care so much about a silly prom? We got enough to worry about, bigger problems than this." And so she told him why. How when she was a teenager, she was sick. All the time. It was how she got the nickname Wheeze. So sick, she missed most of high school, including the big deal moments, like prom. Seeing all the pictures, hearing everybody talk about it, watching through her window at the kids across the street, standing on their front porches for a picture, and then climbing into that limo. She knew what it felt like to never get your prom and how long that feeling would last. Some of us didn't get the childhoods most kids wish for, she said. Some of you know exactly what that feels like. And many of our kids here do too. She said, I just want one night for them. One night when it doesn't have to be about COVID. One night to shine. And pretty much every person on that call stopped, thinking back to their own missed moments and childhoods they didn't wish for, and the chance to do something good for these kids when they needed it most. Well, what should the prom theme be? Somebody asked. We smiled. Easy. A time to shine. They had no idea what they had started. For it is often with the smallest of mustard seeds that faith begins to flourish into something larger than imagined. I mean, isn't that what faith is? However you define your own faith, it's believing in something you can't quite see yet. Because faith depends on trust. Which takes us to another play in our book. This one I call Believe in the Rainbow. The rainbow is our promise that light will always follow the storm. To some of us, the rainbow is a sacred symbol, a promise that the storm will end and that there will be light. This is a promise you can hold on to today, that there is another side to this storm you are in. I promise. But for today, you just have to believe in something you can't see. You have to trust that there is another side waiting for you, where you will find joy again. Now, I'm not going to say that we're all promised a happy ending. Not here, anyway. Or that everything will magically work out, or that you'll get what you want on the other side. I'm just saying the one true thing is that every storm has an end. And so, a vision was born in that meeting, sold to the others not as a we should do this, but rather as a here's why it matters so much to me personally, which is how all the best visions get sold. In fact, can we talk about visions for a minute? I go to a really big church with a lot of things going on, and I asked my pastor once, I said, how do y'all decide which projects to take on? So many needs, so many ideas. I mean, how do you choose? He said they learned a lesson a long time ago that the ideas that they came up with, leadership, in committee meetings around steaming cups of coffee rarely had staying power. He said, they'd start strong, but eventually they'd just kind of fizzle out because they were ideas they were creating and sort of pushing, if you will, on the congregation. But the ideas that came from somebody in the audience, in the congregation, brought up in a hallway conversation in passing, from someone who noticed that single mothers, for example, in the church needed someone to help with car maintenance, and we've got people who are willing and qualified to help. Well, those ideas that bubbled up out of the congregation, they turned out to be the keepers with staying power. Now, I know, we're not all in leadership on this call, but in a way, we kind of are. If you look at leadership as the opportunity to impact someone else, to influence the people around you, to inspire someone on your team. The way I see it, not all of us get leadership titles, but we do get leadership moments. And in those moments, when we find ourselves in our positions of accidental leadership, sure, we'll come up with ideas on our own, but I also think we should look around every now and then and listen to the people in the hallway who have an idea that just bubbles up because they see a need. In times like these, we have got to let go of our tight-fisted ideas of how things should be done, release our grip a little, let go of what should be so we can see what could be. And those of you with an idea, don't be scared to share it, thinking it's too silly. If Weeze could do it, so can you. Now, what I love about Weeze was that it was more than just an idea she came up with. It was a vision, and there's a difference. It's one thing trying to have an idea to let's have a prom. It's another to give these kids a moment to shine in the dark, to make a memory, to help them see something good. Maybe that's the difference in what we do and why we do it. You see, sometimes we get so focused on the what or the how that the why gets lost in the shuffle. I hope you all follow one collective story that you love and that you helped write, of the vision that leads you, inspires you, and reminds you of why you all exist collectively. Now, whether you see it or not, you are part of that bigger story of the good work you put into the world. The story that's bigger than what it says on your door or your job description or your name badge. That story is important because that's what holds all of you together. Without that, you are all just instruments in a symphony playing your own song. The vision puts you all on the same page, playing the same piece. And here's the thing. COVID may have changed your how, but it doesn't change the why. It may make the need look different or force you to take a different road to get there, but nothing can take away your vision. Without a vision, the people will perish. The most important part of the playbook is the vision. It's the collective story that links you all together. It's not the instrument you play in your symphony. It's the music you all follow. And sometimes we forget the notes to this music. So I hope you take this time to strengthen the story of what you do for those you serve and how it affects their communities. Don't just tell the story of what you do, tell the story of why it matters. And let everybody be part of writing this story so that it bubbles up from the congregation instead of being passed down from leadership. Story has great power. Just like we saw with Weeze, the story is what got everybody's attention and it got their buy-in. Facts tell, but stories sell. If you go to kellysfreegift.com, you'll find a copy of my book, The Story Formula, How to Connect and Engage Through the Power of Strategic Storytelling. But for now, let's get back to my story. Proms are hard enough to pull off when times are normal. You got decorations, music, food, directing traffic. It's a lot to orchestrate. But you add a pandemic in the mix and people were quickly reminded why they canceled it in the first place. It is often very hard to navigate when the rules have been changed and there isn't a clear guidebook. So it's important to remember 2 more plays in our book. Sometimes there just isn't a right answer or a right choice. And nobody does it better, gets it right, or comes out ahead on this one. There will not be a clear winner or loser, no better team or better players. It is the game you play to stay standing instead of just racking up points. So don't beat yourself up for decisions you wish you had made. This game isn't black and white. It is only shades of gray. And the 2 most wasted words are if only. Yeah, that's the most wasted energies, time spent looking backwards. A moment worried about what might have been is another moment where you are trading joy for regret. Don't use this moment looking back, because one day you'll look back from somewhere else on this moment and wish you could have this one back. Today's regret-filled moment becomes tomorrow's regret-filled moment. Sticking to a vision is tough when the obstacles and the I told you so's hit. And that's when purpose comes into play, which we're going to get to in a minute. Now, they couldn't have the prom in May like they usually did. The numbers were still too high. Well, then let's have it a few months later, somebody says. In the summer? We can't have a prom in the summer. Who does that? Doesn't make sense. Who ever heard of a summer prom? Using the school was not an option. Too many regulations. Can't have that many people gathered inside. Can you imagine how that would work? Then let's find another way. We'll do it outside. Outside? Are you crazy? What? In a parking lot? Who ever heard? Well, I think that's just about as tacky as you can get. My daughter's not going to be crowned prom queen on an asphalt dance floor. What do you mean there's no king and queen this year? Fred, come here and catch me, because I am surely about to faint in disbelief. Where will the photographer be stationed? How are we going to staff it, it being summer and all? What are we going to do for decorations? Glow sticks? From the dollar store? You have got to be kidding me. Forget the photographer. There is no way we want this to be captured on film forever. And while the audience of naysayers joined in the chorus of "It can't be done," the rest of the town ignored them and got to work finding a way. Hey, I got a quick question. Which group are you in? The chorus of naysayers? Or the ones already looking for another way? Well, let me just tell you, you naysayers, that our history is filled with small groups of people who faced giant obstacles much bigger than this and came out victorious. And all you others, don't you let that few naysayers rob you of what you will discover when you have the courage to try. Harvey's wife thought he was crazy when he said he was going to be driving one of the buses to pick kids up for the prom. But you're the principal, she exclaimed. But he didn't even hear her. He was already off in his closet looking to find that tux that he hoped would still fit. When word got out that some of the girls might not be able to afford dresses with so many of their parents out of work, the ladies over at the community center started collecting donated dresses. They borrowed some sewing machines and got to work. Hard times were no excuse for not having a fancy dress. The men searched their closets for more suits and tuxes they could loan out to the boys. And after that, it just sort of took off with a life of its own, kind of like chickenpox through daycare. Word spread through town about this summer prom that seemed silly until they all explained about Wee's never getting her prom. And did you know how sick she was in high school? And this was really about bringing some light into the dark for these kids when they needed it most, especially those who might not have the kind of life to be envied, if you know what I mean. And if that didn't get everybody right there in the heart. You see, what was happening was that people were getting caught up in the story. Every time someone heard about it, they'd want to help. For when people see good, they often want to be part of it. Not because you told them to, but because they wanted to, because they heard the story. So when you see good in your own organizations or your schools, share that story, and it will inspire others to create more like it and to want to be part of that. And sharing your stories with your team, that has another positive effect. It allows you to sit in another player's seat for a minute. Which brings me to another important strategy for our playbook. Take grace and give it. Be compassionate with yourself and give others the grace to navigate this storm in their own way. Do it for you and not just for them, but because one day you'll need it for yourself. Every time Weeze's story was shared, it tapped into somebody else's childhood memory. They connected to the feeling of missing out. So Weeze's story started as hers, but actually became theirs. So the idea and the vision starts with the one who creates it, but it really takes flight when people take ownership of it personally. When your story becomes their story, that is when vision becomes purpose. You see, vision, like I said, that's the music. Purpose is about your own instrument. The way you play your notes, how you take ownership of your one talent that nobody else has. That the place that as a player you take on the field because of the strengths and the talents you possess personally. When times get tough and the storm rages, now more than ever, you need to embrace this strategy. Find your purpose and don't let go. You're valued more than you'll ever know, ever be told, or ever feel. So don't wait for someone to give it to you. Grab it, own it, hold on to it, and don't let go. Your purpose did not disappear. It just slid behind a cloud. And you have to find a different way to live into it. The need exists. It's just that the way you serve has changed. For now. And if it's time to find a new purpose, then so be it. It's never too late to change direction in your calling. What is your purpose story? The piece you play in this beautiful symphony, the reward you feel, the reason you get up every day, even when you don't feel like getting up every day. It's also important to remember when your purpose is tied into serving others, that your purpose is tied into others, so it's organic. It's shifting, it's moving. You're not serving the same person with the same story as they had 2 years ago. A pandemic changed our stories. Loss changes a story. Hardship changes a story. Victory changes a story. Our lives are complicated twists and turns of action and reaction. How well do you know the story of that person you serve? How has it changed in the last 2 years? What does a day look like now compared to then? What are their emotions, their dreams? If you don't know, how can you find out? It's simply as easy as asking them to share it. We are stronger when we step into each other's stories. That's how we connect. And a simple, tell me what your world looks like right now, can get you into somebody's story really quick. Our world has enough people spewing their opinions, who they're mad at, who's not doing what they think they should be doing. So let's not play that game. Let's take a breath and put a new narrative into the world. The stories of what we're going through. And don't be afraid to tell them your story. Your story has amazing power to connect, to heal, to inspire. They show your team, your employees, your students, your customers, your neighbors, your family, that you understand what they're going through. Your experiences give people with similar experiences comfort. Your hope gives them hope. The key in influencing others, which is what we all want to do, is not in the words you use to communicate, but in the stories you share to connect. It's the story that's contagious and finds a way to become what it needs to be for every listener, as a story often starts as the teller's, but almost always becomes the listener's. And this is really important because then each of you becomes storytellers of your brand. It's kind of like McDonald's. There's tons of McDonald's all over the country. It has a definite brand and a definition. No matter where you go, they sell the same thing that tastes the same way, well, hopefully, for the same price. That's the brand, the collective story, the vision. But the success of McDonald's, whether you give it 5 stars or 1, depends on your own experience, right? And your experience depends on every single person you come into contact with. It doesn't matter what their job is. If that guy mopping the floor drags his wet mop across your new purse, there's going to be words, right? You see, the way the world sees your organization is made up of how the world experiences your organization. I'm going to repeat that because it is so important. The strength of your influence is found in the strength of the experience you create. Story creates an experience. Now, I get it. Maybe it doesn't feel like that today. Shoot, some of you are still just trying to get through the day. I understand. I know the feeling. But one day, when we're on the other side of this, and we will be on the other side of this, they will look back at you and how you treated them and how you were there, what you do today. will matter tomorrow. So each of you gets a part in telling the story of who you are in the work that you do. It's kind of on every single one of you, not just the ones with the biggest microphone, to write this and tell this collective story. Here's another way to look at it. I took piano lessons most of my life growing up, and I had this one teacher. He'd get so frustrated because I wasn't playing this concerto like he wanted. Now, I was playing all the right notes and the tempo with the right fingers, but he said I wasn't playing it with feeling. Haven't you ever been in love? He bellowed. I'm like, no, dude, I'm only 12. Well, until then, he said, you just won't understand this piece. And he stormed off. I had no idea what he meant at the time, but now I do. And I think some of you can relate to the idea that sometimes we can be playing all their notes the way they told us to, and yet still, there's no feeling. You see, as musicians, we can all be given the same piece of music on paper, the vision, yet each of us is going to play it in our own way. We add a feeling and a style to it that makes it personal. How you choose to play that song, well, that's the difference in vision and purpose. Vision is what you do, the collective story. Purpose is why you do it. Why the vision matters to you personally, your story. And I know that for some of you, that purpose feels really far away. You feel beaten down. And you might even be wondering how much longer you can do this. This isn't what you signed up for. But it's just too hard. I get it. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that. But just because you feel like you can't do it doesn't make it true. Truth trumps emotion every time. Don't let emotion drive your car. Honor it as serving a purpose in your life, but then put it in the back seat. And you need to let truth drive. You need to look at what is true, not what you feel. And in case you've forgotten, let me give you some truth right now. Behind every person of greatness lies the memory of a teacher who helped them find it. Even when your classroom stage looks like this, virtual, it still matters just as much, if not even more. You're here. I'm here. You're listening. My words have power today, and so do yours. Just because your light was dimmed by a virus and hidden behind a computer, it doesn't mean your gift was hidden. It was and it is still just as bright, even when your view changes. I need you to know you're changing lives, even when you can't feel it. I need you to know that you don't just make a difference on some days. On some days, you are the difference. And here's an even bigger lesson. If you're waiting for someone else to come make you feel appreciated and validated, and to act like you want them to act, and holding on to grudges, and making sure everybody else holds on to their own grudges, then you are thieves. Because you're robbing others of joy, and you're robbing yourself. You are adding, if not creating, that negative experience. There's a reason they say the rotten apple sours the whole bunch, and we all know a rotten apple. And yes, there have been times, more than I'd like to admit, when I was that rotten apple. It's only human, but there is no happy ending for rotten fruit. It only ends up more bitter. And maybe you're one of those who somehow gets a thrill stirring the pot, making sure people see everything negative that's going on, always pointing out where everybody's coming up short. I know it's fun to gossip. I get it. And somehow it makes us feel better when we can point out who's doing life worse, because then we can feel better about the places where we're coming up short. I understand. I've been there. And I can't make you bitter apples choose to be happy. That's not my job. I can only point out that you deserve to be happy just like the rest of us. And I wish it for you and for the rest of us. I can only say that the best way to put out a fire is to rob it of oxygen so it can't breathe. If there's one thing a rotten apple depends on, it's other fruit. And the only choice I have in my life is what I'm going to do when faced with negativity. Will I choose not to engage, not to feed it? I choose to give oxygen to joy. I don't always get it right, I'm just saying. But it doesn't change the truth. Sorry, a little tough love right there. I don't know. Somebody has to say it. Now back to the story. For the first time ever, the prom was not being planned by committee. The whole town was pitching in. I still remember my prom back in 1984, somebody would say over the hammering of decorations. Remember when Billy Ellersby spiked the punch and our choir teacher, Ms. Eulalie Banks, drank it unknowingly and passed out in the corner? I remember my prom, she says with a smile, as she pauses on the sewing of the hem of that pink prom dress with lace. I was so nervous, about a foot taller than my date, even in flats. Got my first kiss. Now 50 years later, we still dance in the kitchen to the same song we did way back then. Shoot, I bet some of you right now are thinking back to your own prom. I still remember my prom dress. Yes, I got asked, which is a miracle being the geeky kid I was. He was even geekier. My mother was beyond excited. She had the perfect dress waiting in the back of her closet, fresh out of the 60s. Y'all, it was this long olive green skirt with a rick-rack hem. Remember rick-rack? And a big fabric cutout of a snail on the front with a big button for an eye. As if it was good enough for the 60s, by golly, it was good enough for her daughter with the Coke bottle lenses and flyaway frizzy hair from that one time Mom tried to perm it and it never fully recovered. And to make things worse, my mother decides to put me in this dress a few weeks before prom and take me out to the public park for a few pictures. So there I am, mortified, standing up against a tree in this godforsaken skirt while my mother is hosting a photo shoot. And as if that wasn't bad enough, turns out, ducks like rickrack. Or snails. I don't know. Hard to say. We were running too fast to ask them. At the time, thinking back to then, it felt so horrible to be me. But you know what? Now I look back on that time and I realize how truly blessed and happy I was. All that was so good in my life. If I'd only known back then that those would be my skinny days. And as hard as this season might be or have been in our lives, I wonder if one day we're going to look back on this too and realize we were surrounded by blessings. That even though today all we see are the bulges, one day I might look back to find that these are in fact my skinny days. Which brings me to the next play in our book. Today will be tomorrow's good old days. Hard times remind us that life is short. Tomorrow isn't promised. Don't put off your joy. Live full on today, even if it's storming. As my hero, Dolly Parton, said it best, don't be so busy living that you forget to make a life. And the next play, if you're too busy focused on what isn't, you'll miss what is. If we choose to find bitter, we'll find it every time. No one can help you find happiness and joy. No life will create the perfect set of circumstances to make you at peace. It is only a choice you make, what you choose to see. A life of joy was never about the life you received, but the life you painted with what you received. Anyway, back to the prom story. That was a special time in our town you don't see often. People coming together like that otherwise probably wouldn't. Being part of something bigger, each one caught up in the story. People who one day were arguing about politics, the next day were holding the ladder for each other. Which is another important strategy to remember. It's the people around you who will be your greatest strength. Don't turn on each other. The world is already too divided. Divided only sends us to different corners where hate and anger grow. We got to come in the middle, link arms, and choose to find in each other what makes us alike, not different. It's not about winning or being right or defending our position. It's about defending what we care about. Our why doesn't change, just the how. Let's not be defeated because we can't get past the how. And don't you be tricked either by someone with that big microphone telling you how the other side thinks or feels about you. We're smarter than that. Let your neighbors speak for themselves. The neatest thing was seeing the young and the old working together and actually enjoying each other's company. The older people enjoying this delicious fragrance of youth and a chance to visit where visitors were often few. The young enjoying the attention and not realizing what nuggets of wisdom were being buried inside of them that they would one day unpack with great fondness from those unexpected mentors who understood exactly what it was like not to have a mother around. And here, dear, try on this dress to see if it fits. When someone reaches out to me, they usually come to me wanting to be a client or a student to learn from my teaching, at least in my world. But some of them coming looking for a mentor. And I know immediately this person is someone different. They want me to be an important part of their life. Because being a mentor, as I'm sure you would agree, is something that goes beyond our job. You hold a bigger place in someone's heart. The truth is that many people in this world don't have someone in their corner. Someone who believes in them. Maybe they don't even have someone to give them the basic things a person or a child should have. Now, I was blessed in my life to have people come along at the right time to breathe hope into my soul. People who saw something in me I didn't see in myself, who spoke a truth from a spot further down the road that I was walking. The mentors who pave our lives and make us strong. You see, I think our town needed to be reminded of that, the importance of mentorship. And a lot of us think we can't be mentors. We're not smart enough, that nobody cares about our opinion, that we don't know how to be a good mentor, or that we just don't have time, when really, they just need us to show up. Someone to show them we believe in them, especially those that never had anyone tell them that. It's not too hard to just be there. And the best way to connect as a mentor is to share your story. Telling them what they should do is never as powerful as showing them that you understand what they're going through because you've been there. Story has a powerful way of illustrating your truth. It lets them experience what you have to share. It shows them you can relate. No, we're not all going to relate to exactly what you went through, but we relate to how it made you feel. We connect through the emotions in our story, not the plot. I may not know what it was like for you to move here from another country, but if you tell me you felt alone, scared, worried about how you were going to make money to feed your kids, well, those are feelings I can recognize. It's the shared human experience that connects us, and it's the story that holds it. And here's the weird thing that I think maybe you of all people could understand. Some of us are already mentors in our jobs. Teachers are a great example. My job as a motivational speaker to inspire people is also to mentor them. But sometimes when being a mentor becomes our job, we forget its magic. I start to think of it like a job instead of a calling. I start to forget the difference I'm making because I'm so busy trying to make a difference. Does that make sense? During 2020, I had to really stop and ask myself, why did I sign up for this? Why was I given this gift in the first place? What is the reason deeper than a paycheck for my existence? And how can I tap back into that feeling again of doing the job, the joy of doing it, instead of just doing the job? Know what I mean? Leaders don't give you your purpose. Your job doesn't give you your purpose. You find your purpose in your job. On the afternoon of the prom, a handful of volunteers stood there in the parking lot, surveying their work with nervous anxiety. They were standing in that moment where you wonder if you made the right choice, where that courage you had yesterday isn't as strong. People ask me all the time as a speaker and an entertainer how I learned how to feel brave. Well, that brings me to another playbook strategy. You don't wait to feel brave. You got to choose brave. Somebody famous said you miss all the shots you didn't take. Was it Wayne Gretzky? I don't know. Courage isn't something we act on when we feel we are ready. It's something we act on despite the fact that we can't feel its existence. All throughout history, small armies of men and women have crouched in foxholes, outnumbered by a stronger enemy, yet still fought to that last moment for what they believed in. And so can we. Don't wait to feel brave. Choose brave. Oh, and side note, same thing with love. Make it a choice, not a feeling. Choose to love people in the tough times, even when it's hard. Often in life, we think love is something that happens to us, we fall into, that we hope will last. Often are the words spoken, I just don't love you anymore. But true love isn't something we wait to feel and hope it stays. It's a thing we do. It's a choice we make even when it's hard. Imagine a world where we all choose to love a little bit more than we hate. As the last few volunteers stood there surveying their acts of courage, someone whispered, well, we did the best we could with what we had. And they all went home to clean up and pray for the best. You know, I think that at the end of my life, when I get to my final resting spot and look back on all I've done, I don't know, I think I'll be okay if I can say I did the best I could with what I had. It was still light out when kids started arriving in their borrowed cars and the yellow buses that had been decorated with silver streamers but still smelled a little like old gym socks. If you were passing through town, you might have turned your nose up at the idea of a prom held in a parking lot between the Sunnyside Hills Assisted Living Center, you know, that ugly old gray high-rise building with all the windows, the China Dragon on the other side with the faded orange blinking sign that always says 2 for 1 special, even if there wasn't, and Turley's Tire Repair with the closed until further notice sign hanging on the front door, another victim of the virus. You might have thought it would be tacky that right up front was a big black barbecue grill with the district attorney standing there watching over his special homemade barbecue, while the superintendent was serving up his award-winning sauce. 2 people in payroll were working the punch bowl to make sure it didn't get spiked. And the sheriff was running the DJ booth and kept insisting on playing his favorite tunes from the 80s. And remember when Like a Virgin was the most shocking lyric? Those were the days. You might have laughed at the asphalt dance floor that had been painted over in glitter, temporary paint of course, by a dedicated group of maintenance and operations staff who had argued for an hour in the Hobby Lobby on what color glitter best fit the mood. Or the pickup trucks lining the perimeter with their high beams on because the parking lot lights weren't bright enough. Each one measured and strategically placed into position by school facility planners and engineers. The truck beds, of course, were filled with sofas and coolers, because some people in our town will take any excuse to tailgate. The parking lot was filled with other volunteers from all walks of the community who had stepped up to help, not one of them ever uttering that this wasn't their job. They were just neighbor helping neighbor. That's something you don't always see anymore, not everywhere. But the world's filled with people like that, the ones who step up in ways you never see. We just don't always hear about them. You know, the countless people who work behind the curtain instead of out front and who rarely get the credit for what they do, for their part in the story. Kind of like you. You're the ones we never see behind the curtain making things work, making things run, making a difference, and probably not appreciated as much as you should be. And not all of you on the front lines. I mean, I always buy the teacher a gift. I don't think of all the others who work just as hard, who just get blended into what we call the system. And that's the thing, I'm sure you can relate, that people seem to quickly forget. Those of us on the outside of the school system, those of us caught up in comments like, the system is broken, the system has failed us, the system is doing this to our kids. We sometimes forget that you aren't a system. You're people. You're our neighbors, our friends, our family members, doing the best you can with what you got. And probably never truly appreciated enough. So at least let me be the one to thank you for that. Sorry I didn't get you a gift last year. I think one thing that's important to remember in our playbook is that every person on that field is important, from the players to the ones carrying the water. It's not just the teachers out front teaching, but also every person, like I said, behind that curtain, the people you don't see that work just as hard, and all of you tell the story of these lives that you change. Are you taking the time to honor those people who aren't often thought about? People in maintenance, AV, the people in hidden cubicles in the back, people running the virtual meetings. So yeah, from the outside in, this prom might have seemed tacky and hardly worth the effort. And yes, there were masks, and kids looked a little weird dancing at a social distance, but shoot, most of them are pretty weird at that age anyway. So in passing, you might have thought that a time to shine was far from the right theme and that the prom was a silly idea. But you would have been wrong. I remember the moment when it got dark. It was one of those quick turns, from day to night. And this hush swept over the parking lot all at once. For in one blink of an eye, out of nowhere, suddenly, we were swept up into this breathtaking blanket of twinkling lights. They were everywhere. They were strung through trees, from light pole to light pole. There must have been thousands. How long must it have taken? It was like the sky full of stars had dropped down around all of us, wrapping us up in this blanket of magic. And the assisted living home, which just moments before was the same dingy old gray high-rise building, was now lit up like a million stars. Like most things in life, it had taken the sun to go down for the light to be most brilliant. For it took the dark to see the full beauty in what they had done. Residents who had been waiting, poised in position at every available window pane from their front row seats, sat there waving their dollar store glow sticks. I'm not sure who it was that began to sing. Just somebody in the crowd, overcome with emotion, I guess, but it was authentic. It was real. It was raw. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. The notes were coming from someplace far down in a weary soul that had been enchanted out of its misery. If you were there, you'd understand. Maybe in a way you are. For in this moment, it wasn't about a school dance. And it wasn't just about the kids. It was about the whole town needing this moment to be reminded that all those ordinary flickers of light, when strung together, become something quite extraordinary. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine. And that one thin reed of hope sang into the breeze a million rays of comfort as each person remembered the power of their own light. And while it was unexpected, it was somehow strangely perfect. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine. We watched as one of the senior boys, captain of the football team, walked across the parking lot right up to Miss Wees, who was still standing there holding the ladle for a punch bowl. And he placed the plastic rhinestone crown on her head. And not one person contested. And he held out his hand and he asked her to dance. And just like that, Wees got her moment to be the queen of the prom. And if you could have seen the look on her face, well, I swear she looked 16 all over again. And everybody watching knew that this alone had made every single moment of work worth it. And from that moment on, nobody noticed the dresses with crooked hems that smelled a little like mothballs, or the boys whose suit sleeves dangled a touch too far. They were all too busy enjoying what they had been part of. The theme could not have been more fitting, for this was, for all of them, a moment to shine. And if you'd been there and had chosen to see something different, well, then you're the one we'd feel sorry for, not them. That night, there was a symphony. I truly do think that the big conductor in the sky up there delights in scripting another masterpiece, not with the most expensive, shiny instruments, or the most renowned and polished musicians, but with the most ordinary of notes, the unseemingly simple arrangement that, when played, can turn 1,000,000 ordinary glow sticks into a concerto. Why? I don't know. Maybe just to prove to us that no matter how weary or how ordinary our life may seem, that there is always the possibility of an unexpected symphony, if you just trust the notes and have the courage to continue to play, to get back up, even when you don't think you can. This playbook, while filled with strategies that will help you stay strong, is really not about the strategies. It's about the players, you. For the truth of this Silver Linings playbook is that it isn't really about the plays, and it isn't really about the music. It's about you, the players, the musicians, and it will always be about you. You don't just make a difference. You are the difference. Each one of you brings to the dark an amazing light, whose power is truly shown when they are all strung together. That night, it was a reminder to us that the little things can make the biggest difference. That it's the small moments that truly add up to a big life. We often think that victory, success, and worth comes in the big things that the whole world notices, when the truth is that the most beautiful worth comes in the small things that most of the world never sees. But to that one person who got to see that light, it was the one thing that saved them. Our town is almost on the other side of this pandemic now, some already planting new seeds, some with scars that'll never quite heal. And if you asked them to look back on it all and find their silver linings, I'm sure most everybody would remember the night of the parking lot prom, the night of 1,000 stars, and the music of ordinary people proving that there is still good in the world. Proving to me, anyway, that sometimes you need the darkness in order to find the light. Now, I would like to give you an assignment, and it's a rather strange one, if you will. But I never promised to be normal. I'm going to give you a sign, much like your rainbow. And this sign will be a group of lights strung together. And whenever you see that, those twinkling lights, I want you to remember this story. And I want you to know that every single light you see signifies all the times you brought the light you bring into someone's dark world. Today, we applaud you. I'm Kelly Swanson. May all your days lead to unexpected symphonies. The end.